Just call me Emily. Ever since I was a kid, I've always been intrigued by abandoned places, especially those with mysterious histories. That's why, when I heard about the old, shut-down 7-Eleven just outside our town, I couldn't help myself. I had to explore it, despite its terrifying reputation. It was somewhere down south, in a quiet county in the rural part of the state, where the rumors first started to spread. The story was that the convenience store had shut down 10 years ago after a night shift cashier went missing. Some said it was just a robbery gone wrong, that the cashier was killed and their body dumped somewhere. But others had more chilling things to say. They claimed that something far more terrifying had happened, right inside the dark hallways of that 7-Eleven. One night, I decided to go check it out myself. I brought along 2 of my closest friends, Sarah and Mark. All we had with us were flashlights and nerves of steel. Within minutes, we had climbed through the busted entrance. The whole area was dead silent. The screech of the door as we pushed it open shattered the quiet, and for a moment I regretted coming. We were greeted by shelves caked in dust and old, expired food scattered across the floor. The only sounds were the echo of our footsteps as we walked deeper into the dark store. Then I noticed something odd, strange markings on the floor. I took pictures of them with my phone. They seemed important, at least to someone like me who's always been fascinated by weird graffiti and hidden symbols. The walls felt like they were full of secrets, and I couldn't wait to find out what was really going on there. That's when we started hearing it. A whisper. It was so faint, we couldn't make out the words. We froze and exchanged looks, but we were curious, stupidly curious, so we followed the sound. It led us toward a room in the back, probably where the employees used to rest or store supplies. The whispers grew louder, clearer. I could finally make out words like, "Don't leave," and "Join us." The room was almost pitch black, but we saw something strange, a trapdoor, or something like a hidden entrance. That's where the sound was coming from. We hesitated, but in the end, curiosity won. We opened it. Inside was a narrow spiral staircase that led down, probably to a basement. It looked old and dangerously unstable, but we didn't even think twice. We started climbing down. At the bottom, we found a large, open space. It was surrounded by lit candles, arranged in a perfect pentagram. People, real people, were standing around it, dressed in ragged, torn clothing. Their eyes were wide and wild. They looked like they hadn't slept or eaten in days, and they were chanting something over and over in a language we couldn't understand. That's when the fear finally sank in. The chanting grew louder, and suddenly it felt like they were surrounding us, closing in. Panic hit hard. We didn't know what to do, so we shoved past them, scrambling back up the stairs. We didn't stop until we reached the top and slammed the trapdoor shut behind us. Back in the abandoned store, the place was eerily quiet again. The voices were gone. The markings on the floor had disappeared. We didn't waste another second. We ran outside as fast as we could, but even after we were out, we couldn't calm down. We just kept looking back, wondering if something or someone was following. None of us could believe what we'd seen. It felt like something out of a horror movie, and even though it's been a few years since that night, we're all still haunted by the memories of what we saw under that old, forgotten 7-Eleven. You don't have to believe me, that's up to you, but we'll never forget it. Good day, sir. Just call me Andrew. The story I'm about to share is about something that happened to my older brother. Let's just call him Michael. There are 5 of us siblings. Michael was the second oldest, while I was the third. Our eldest sibling is also a guy, and then we have 2 younger sisters. Michael was the kind of person who had a lot of friends, practically wherever he went. Back in our old neighborhood in Northfield, Ohio, it seemed like he knew someone in every corner. This made our mum worry a lot, especially since he barely stayed home. There was even a time when he didn't come home for 5 straight days because he stayed at a friend's wake. That friend had died from leukemia. I never really understood why my brother was always so devoted to his friends, like he treated them more like family than us. Sometimes it even hurt, especially when he graduated and started working. Every time he got paid, he spent almost all of it hanging out with his crew. When he finally came back from that wake, our mom scolded him badly. It was like he was the one who had lost a family member. His body was slumped, his eyes deeply sunken. He looked like he hadn't eaten or slept. Then came the final night of the wake. Michael said he was going again. Mom and Dad didn't want to let him go anymore, but he insisted, and there was nothing they could do. After his friend's funeral, we noticed that something changed in him. He became quiet, withdrawn. He didn't want to eat, didn't want to leave his room, and all he did was sleep. Mom asked him what was going on, but he didn't respond. He just lay on his bed, face buried in his pillow. One time I entered his room and saw him blankly staring at his phone, mumbling over and over, "I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I wasn't there." Maybe he was talking to his friend, the one who died. I saw tears running down his face, so I asked if he wanted to go out and take a ride. We had a motorcycle, and I used to invite him on rides often, but he rarely came with me. He was always with his friends. Our mum was a bit relieved that he finally agreed to go. But the odd thing was, he barely said a word. He didn't smile, didn't move much. Then one afternoon, he just stayed in his room the entire day. Suddenly, his friends arrived in an SUV and invited him on a road trip. There were 7 of them. Our mum didn't want him to go. She said he looked too weak, but again, Michael insisted, saying he felt fine. Just before he left, our mum told him, "Sit in the back, not in the front passenger seat." But he didn't seem to hear her. He laughed and sat right next to the driver. As the car pulled away, I saw Mom make the sign of the cross, her face pale with fear. I asked her why. "I think I just saw Michael's reflection in the window," she said, "and he had no head." I tried to calm her down, told her that kind of superstition didn't mean anything these days. But what happened next still sends chills down my spine. One of Michael's friends later told us that during the drive, Michael had been unusually talkative, saying all kinds of random stuff. Then he asked a strange question. "If I die, would all of you come to my wake too? Will everyone be there?" Everyone fell silent. Then Michael laughed out loud and started muttering things they couldn't understand. One of his friends asked if he was okay, why he wasn't going out with them like before. He didn't answer, he just whispered something. The driver later said he heard the word "die" from Michael. Out of nowhere, one of the tires blew out. The SUV lost control and veered into the other lane, heading straight toward an oncoming 10-wheeler truck. Just before impact, Michael grabbed the steering wheel and swerved hard to the right, crashing into a utility pole instead. The front of the SUV was crushed. Everyone was injured, except Michael, who took the worst of it. When our mum found out, she fainted. We all cried our eyes out. Michael was almost unrecognizable from the injuries. I won't describe how his face looked. It's just too painful. But it was nothing like the brother we once knew. His death was so sudden. Mom kept blaming herself for letting him go, especially after seeing that terrifying reflection. We realized there had been so many signs, but we ignored them. What should have been just a fun road trip ended in a tragic accident. It felt like death had already marked Michael, and we were just too blind to see it. There was something I never told our mum back then, something even more chilling. I kept seeing Michael outside our house, but when I checked his room, he'd still be lying on his bed. Once I even woke up and found him standing in my room. When I tried to speak to him, he turned around and walked out. I followed him, but he vanished. Then I looked back into his room, and there he was, still lying down. A friend of mine said it might have been Michael's doppelganger, a sign that something terrible was about to happen. I don't know why his behavior changed so drastically after his friend's wake. It was only after the accident that we found a note in his phone. He'd written that he kept dreaming about his dead friend, kept seeing him everywhere. He said he felt guilty for not being there the night his friend passed away. He was the only one missing that night. I remembered it was Dad's birthday, and we'd all gone out as a family. Michael had been at the wake almost every night after that. In fact, it was the same group of friends he'd asked in the SUV, "Will you all be there at my wake?" He must have felt the same sadness his friend once felt, the feeling of being left behind. It still hurts to remember how we lost Michael. I hope, wherever he is now, that his soul is finally at peace. Hi, sir and everyone. I'm Claire. I'll admit it, I used to be a brat. When I was younger, I had a bad attitude. I was quick-tempered, easily annoyed, and I often fought with my younger sibling. I'd also get into arguments with friends over even the smallest mistakes. Both my parents worked abroad, so my siblings and I lived with our grandparents, my mom's parents, who totally spoiled me, especially since I was an only child for several years before my sibling was born. I'm not using any of that as an excuse for how I acted. I even lashed out at people I didn't know. I deeply regret being that way, especially after what happened. It almost cost me my life. It was January 2004, and I was in my junior year of high school. We had a school field trip that day, something I couldn't forget because it was also my younger sibling's birthday. I even bought them a stuffed toy when we stopped by the mall. I was with my best friend Jessa that whole day, and she witnessed everything that happened. Our last stop on the field trip was a large shopping mall. Jessa and I got separated from the rest of the group because I asked her to go with me while I bought a stuffed toy. Afterward, she asked me to come with her to the restroom. We were joking around, laughing, until suddenly, a woman, probably in her 30s, bumped into me. Hard. I dropped my water bottle, and it spilled everywhere. I was furious. She didn't even say sorry, and the way she bumped into me was rough. I cursed at her, shouted, "Really?" Jessa tried to calm me down, but I was too angry. I snapped at the woman with harsh words. She just gave me a cold look and walked away. That made me even angrier. She was the one who bumped into me and she couldn't even say sorry. And I guess because I was still immature back then, I walked up behind her and bumped her back, deliberately, then quickly walked away. We went to the restroom, but I couldn't shake off the irritation. The joy I had felt during the trip was gone, replaced by annoyance. Later that night, I started feeling strange. My stomach hurt. At first it was just mild discomfort, but it quickly worsened. It felt like something was twisting and turning inside me. I also felt like throwing up, but I couldn't. I tried going to the bathroom, thinking it would relieve the pain, but nothing worked. The pain just got worse. I was doubled over, crying from the sheer agony. Eventually, I was taken to the hospital. They gave me medicine and hooked me up to an IV, but the pain only intensified. I was in so much pain I couldn't stop crying. That's when I saw something terrifying. At the doorway, I noticed a woman watching me. I couldn't make out her face clearly because I was so weak from the pain, but I knew she was there. She didn't move, just stared at me. When I glanced at the window, she was there too. And when I looked again at the door, there she was. I told my grandmother, but she said there was no one there. I doubled over again from the pain. Another woman who was tending to her own patient nearby told my grandmother that I may have been cursed, that someone might have given me the usog, or cast a spiritual affliction on me. She suggested we take me to a local healer, a folk doctor, because no matter what the hospital did, I wasn't getting better. My grandmother agreed and immediately started looking for one. When the healer arrived, the first thing he said was, "Someone put a curse on her." He rubbed oil on my stomach and made me drink an herbal concoction. Right after, I started vomiting, non-stop. What came out of me was horrifying. It was yellowish and thick, with little black lumps. And when we took a closer look, we saw insects, small bugs, and even wriggling worms. We were all horrified. The healer said I had been cursed by someone very experienced in the dark arts. The curse had been carried on the wind, probably when I crossed paths with them. Thankfully, he was able to counter it. Before he left, the healer warned me, "Don't ever pick fights with strangers. Stop lashing out. Your bad attitude is what drew this curse to you." I was shocked. How did he know what I'd done? How did he know about my personality? Thankfully, the curse wasn't meant to kill me. It was just a warning, a lesson, and it was a lesson. From that day on, I tried my best to change. I stopped being so quick to anger, especially toward people I didn't know. I never wanted anything like that to happen again. That's my story, sir. I hope others learn from it too. Hello to everyone. I just want to share our experience. Something that happened to me and my group of friends. It happened a few years ago. I honestly don't know what we were thinking that night. There were 5 of us, and we decided, out of nowhere, to play with a Ouija board. We went to an old, abandoned house at the end of a street in South Triangle, a district near Los Angeles. It was already around 10 p.m. when a heavy downpour suddenly started. That's when we decided to open the door of the abandoned house. Luckily, it wasn't locked. We were all curious, so we stepped inside. I pulled the old Ouija board out of my bag, laid everything out on the floor, and we began. "Is there a spirit here?" Jessa asked first. Her hands were visibly shaking. After a moment, the glass started moving, slowly, and pointed to yes. To be honest, I wasn't sure if one of my friends was messing around and pushing the glass on purpose. Maybe it was all a joke. "Are you an evil spirit?" Dan asked next. The glass slowly moved to no. That's when the uneasy feeling really started settling in. "What's your name?" I asked, but this time the glass didn't move at all. Marco, who earlier was the most fearless of us, suddenly said, "All right, maybe we should just stop playing now." We were using only our flashlights for light, and there was one streetlight outside the house that provided a faint glow through a broken window. The house itself was pitch dark inside, silent, musty, and full of old furniture draped with white sheets. Just as we were about to pack up and leave, something bizarre happened. The lights in the house started flickering, on and off, erratic and fast. It was terrifying because earlier, when we entered the house, I'd tried the light switches and they didn't work. But now, the bulbs overhead were strobing like a haunted house in a movie. Then a strong gust of wind blasted through the open hallway, so intense that our flashlights flickered too. Then came the footsteps, distinct, heavy, slow, but none of us were walking. We were frozen in place. From where we stood, we saw what looked like a shadow dash quickly across the room in front of us. I know none of us moved. We were all paralyzed with fear. And then, the glass on the Ouija board slid across the letters. It stopped on one letter, then another. C, B, E, L, Isabel. As soon as it spelled that name, we heard soft crying, a woman's cry. It was faint at first, like it came from a distance, but it was inside the house. The crying started to get louder, echoing off the walls. That was it. We were done. Too terrified to even think clearly, we grabbed our flashlights and bolted out of the abandoned house, nearly tripping over ourselves in the dark. In our panic, we forgot to take the Ouija board. We left it behind on the floor. We didn't know what just happened. We didn't understand it. But we knew, deep down, that we made a terrible mistake. We shouldn't have played with something like that. We shouldn't have summoned something we didn't understand. This happened 18 years ago, and yet it still haunts me. That's the end of my story. Thank you for reading. Hi, Sir Bob, and to all listeners, I'm Darren. I'm one of your many silent listeners, and I'd like to share an experience my friends and I had during a beach getaway we once took. It happened a few years back. My friend Sean treated us all to a 3-day stay at a private beach resort in California. There were 7 of us who went, riding together in a van. The trip took about 2 hours. The resort was private. You had to book it ahead of time before checking in. We left before dawn and arrived at around 7 a.m. The check-in time wasn't until 11, but since there were no other guests and the place was already clean and ready, we were allowed to settle in early. We basically had the whole resort to ourselves. It wasn't peak season yet, and it was even drizzling when we arrived. We spent the entire morning resting inside the rooms. There were 3 rooms total. My friend Seema and his girlfriend Andy shared one, while I stayed in the second room with our friends Joyce and Amira. The third room was for the 2 other guys, Albert and Joseph. After lunch, we went out to eat, chilled a bit, and came back again at night to enjoy the beach. The moon was full and bright, which gave us the idea to take a walk along the shoreline. The place had a large swimming pool and direct beach access. There weren't any lights near the shore, but since the moonlight was strong, we figured it would be fine to build a bonfire instead. Management had given us permission. Farther down the beach, we found what looked like the remains of a concrete structure, some kind of ruined house. The roof was gone, and only parts of the walls remained. The floor had already been sunken into the sand, but there were still a few intact concrete slabs that we could use as makeshift benches. That's where we settled down. They brought out some drinks and snacks, and we spent the time talking and laughing. We were having a great time. Then Joyce excused herself to pee and asked me and Amira to go with her. We just went behind the ruined structure where it was more private. But suddenly, a large group of birds flew out from a thick tree just ahead of us. The sound was loud, like a sudden explosion. Joyce jumped up. She said she wasn't even finished yet. All 3 of us turned to look at the tree. It didn't make sense. It was already nighttime, so what would have startled that many birds? When we got back to the group, we asked if they heard the birds too. Some of them said yes. They heard what sounded like wings flapping all at once. It was weird because no one disturbed them, and besides, what kind of birds fly around at night? Someone said maybe they were bats instead, but we didn't see anything. Then, just as we were about to brush it off, I looked up. The full moon made the sky so clear, and in that moment, I saw a giant bird fly out from one of the trees. I pointed at it and everyone turned to look. They saw it too. It was huge, and then it vanished. Albert suddenly blurted out, "What if that was a manananggal?" We all laughed nervously. That couldn't be it. It looked like a giant bird, sure, but definitely not a mythical monster. Still, we decided to return to the resort. Something about the area just didn't feel right anymore. It was like we weren't alone. Even as we walked back, we had this feeling like there was someone else walking with us, someone we couldn't see. When we were near the entrance of the resort, we saw something ahead, a figure. It was standing still in the middle of the path. We all froze. At first, we thought it might be a person or maybe a dog, but the longer we stared, the more our instincts told us it wasn't human. It didn't move. It just stood there, facing us. And then, it spread its wings, massive leathery wings. Someone shouted, and we were all ready to run. But Andy told us to stop, to stay calm and hold hands. I could feel my hands trembling. We really thought it was about to attack. Its wings were wide open, ready. But then, it took off. We could hear the force of its wings as it flapped upward into the air. It hovered for a few seconds, circling in the sky, then flew off into the distance. That's when we ran, sprinted straight back into the resort. None of us wanted to be alone that night. We all crowded into one room and talked about what we saw. Was it a giant bat? A monster? A manananggal? We didn't know. The next day, we asked one of the resort staff if they'd ever seen anything strange around the area. They didn't seem surprised, but they also didn't give us a straight answer. I had a gut feeling they knew something, but didn't want to say anything to scare us. The following night, we stayed by the pool instead. No one wanted to go back to the beach, no matter how bright the moon was. We just watched the ocean from a distance. Maybe it had something to do with the full moon, or maybe we crossed paths with something we weren't supposed to see. So Bob, and to your listeners, do any of you know what we saw that night? Some people we've talked to say it might have been a creature kept by a witch, or maybe the witch itself. Thank you to anyone who responds, and please, everyone stay safe. Good day, sir, and to everyone listening. I'm Shira. This story is about my cousin, let's just call him Nico, and what happened to him and his friends. We're from a small rural town in Nebraska, and we live right next door to each other. I'll never forget this experience. It happened during the birthday of one of our relatives in a nearby town. Nico had asked permission from his mom to attend the party, but she didn't allow him to go. Why? Because there would be no one left at home to look after his 7-year-old little brother. My uncle and aunt, his parents, were going to the farmer's market that day to sell their produce. They had a tricycle, in our Americanized version, let's call it a small utility ATV, but they weren't taking it with them because a delivery van was scheduled to pick up the vegetables. They strictly told Nico not to take the ATV. Apparently, he had a habit of sneaking out with it when left home alone. But that day, he begged me to keep an eye on his little brother for just a bit, said he had to buy something real quick. Later that afternoon, I heard from neighbors that Nico had taken off in the ATV at full speed. I knew he had a spare key. What we didn't know was that he had picked up 3 of his friends along the way. One of them was still eating lunch when Nico pulled up to his house, and he didn't even hesitate to hop on when invited. So there were 4 of them, all riding on that small ATV Nico wasn't even allowed to use. I was irritated because I had plans myself that day, but I ended up stuck babysitting his brother. It was just me and my mom at home, and she was busy tending her plants in the backyard. I eventually fell asleep, but when I woke up, Nico still hadn't returned. Then, a man I didn't recognize knocked at Nico's house. I came out and told him that no one was home. He asked me if I knew someone named Nico and his 3 friends. I told him Nico was my cousin and that I knew his friends too. They were all childhood friends of ours. The man fell silent for a moment and asked where Nico's parents were. I didn't tell him, but I asked what this was about. That's when he said something that made my knees go weak. He said he had been driving down the highway when he witnessed an accident involving the ATV. Nico's vehicle had collided with a 10-wheeler truck. All 3 of his friends, those sitting in front, died on the spot. Only Nico survived. I ran back inside, panicked, and called my mom. I could barely think. Everything went blank. According to the man, Nico had been sitting in the back of the ATV, and when he saw the truck coming, he managed to jump out just before the crash. That's the only reason he survived. But what shocked us even more, Nico wasn't even the one driving. I couldn't understand it. Why wasn't he in the driver's seat? He was the one who took the vehicle, but we were just grateful he was alive. We rushed to the hospital. Nico was sobbing as the doctors cleaned and dressed his wounds. We asked him why he let someone else drive, and he said his friend insisted on it, and he didn't want to argue. He never expected they'd run into a truck. Nico told us that when the truck came into view, the driver panicked and swerved. The ATV flipped and slammed into the truck. The whole front section was crushed. People in the town started whispering that Nico must be the devil's child. How else could he have survived when everyone else died so horribly? Even his parents were devastated. He got grounded for months and was pulled out of school. He was sent to live with our great-aunt, an old spinster who lived alone in the countryside. Some neighbors even started calling him Satan's kid behind his back. Years have passed since the accident. Nico is married now and has a family of his own, but he still visits the graves of his 3 friends every year. He still carries the guilt and continues to apologize to their parents, especially during holidays and anniversaries. What happened that day is something our family will never forget. To this day, I still hear whispers when people talk about that accident. And to be honest, sometimes I wonder too, why did he survive when no one else did? Was it fate? Was it chance? Or was it something darker? This is the painful story of my cousin and his childhood friends. I hope you were able to read it, sir.